Hey everyone, welcome back to She Verse Podcast. I'm your host, Brittany Shell, and today's guest is Lynda. Hi, Lynda.
Hi, how are
Thank-
you?
Great. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
My pleasure.
So, can you tell our listeners what inspired you to write Don't Look Back?
Honestly, it was 15 years in the making. And I was just writing as a hobby, casually, kind of letting my stories collect in a drawer. And we got to this moment with COVID where I was seeing on Instagram other people posting and sharing that they'd written a book or that they'd written a book and it was getting published already, a year into the pandemic. And I thought, why am I not doing this, right? I've been putting this off for so long, but if now is not the moment, then when? So I enrolled at the program, the Humber School for Writers Mentorship Program.
Oh,
So I took that with Danila Botha, and I worked on the book back and forth with her, and that's how it came together. So it wasn't so much an inspiration for the stories. It was very much, this is the time I've wanted to do this for my whole life. I'm going to be turning 40 soon. Let's light a fire under this.
that's amazing. So, how did you choose which stories to include in the collection?
Well, honestly, I wanted to include everything. And I think that's the instinct you go with when it's your first collection, because it's like, is this going to be my only book? Will there ever be another one? I don't know. Let's stuff it all in there. But at some point, you have to take a step back and say, what is the most cohesive to the message I'm sending? How do they all fit together? And also, what's the most done? I have certain pieces, they feel a little like unripe fruit. Like I'm close to it, I'm passionate about it, but those ones had to stay back.
Oh, okay. So, is there a character or a story in the book that feels most personal to you?
Honestly, there's a few. Um, there's one character, and the story is told through second person. And it's about the year following an assault, an intimate partner assault, and just how she's processing through that year. She's kind of walking around with PTSD. She's dropped out of school. She's now the maid of honor for a dear friend's wedding, and she's not coping. And it's this weird state of limbo you can find yourself in after something like that has happened to you, which it did happen to me. And what happened when I was assaulted is I lost my voice as a writer. I wasn't able to write. Every weekend, I would take my notebook and I would go to a coffee shop and I would sit and I would write down the same words over and over in a single paragraph, trying to come up with a story to tell. And I couldn't tell the story of what happened to me until I switched to the second person. And after 10 months of not writing anything but those little blurby paragraphs of, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, I came up with this story and it liberated me.
Oh, nice, nice. So, how did you balance raw emotional truth with the art of storytelling?
You know, I'm not sure if I've ever been good at striking a balance there. People tell me I can make my characters very like sarcastic.
Hmm.
And often I take away some of the emotional rawness because that's their armor.
Hmm.
And it's my armor too. So I need to consult other readers to find out, is this vulnerable enough?
Hmm.
That's something I have to push myself towards being more of.
Hmm.
I write about very vulnerable topics, but I tend to engage in them in a very, I don't know, a little bit of a sideways, dark, humorous bent.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
were there any stories that were particularly difficult for you to write, and why?
There's one story in there where I made the main character bipolar, which I am,
Mhm.
and it's a divorce story. She's divorcing her husband, but they're still living under the same roof. He's packing up his boxes. He's leaving her. She's feeling very hurt by this. but the reason he's leaving her is because she doesn't want to have children, and the reason
Um,
she doesn't want to have children is she's bipolar. So she's decided that she doesn't wanna risk what could happen if she has a child and she passes it on, or
mhm,
if she has an episode after the child is born and her husband is kind of on his own juggling that. She's just decided she doesn't wanna do that.
mhm.
Too big of a risk for her. Not to say that nobody can. I was raised by a bipolar mother. It's okay. For her story, she was losing him because of her choice, and she's feeling very guilty and sad about that. And the place it came from for me was realizing at the end of my fertile years, if you will, that my husband could change his mind about this decision we'd made together not to have children. At any
Yeah,
moment, he could turn around and find someone younger, and he could say, "I want children, and this is what I'm gonna do." The door closes on you when you're a woman, and that was a really a dark place for me to go. I remember my husband looking at this story and he was asking, "Is this about us? Are you afraid I'm gonna leave you?"
aw,
And I don't think it was that. It was just knowing the unfairness of it that he could.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, how do you hope readers will feel after reading your stories?
Well, I hope first and foremost entertained, right? I hope to get a few laughs,
Yeah.
maybe a tear or 2, but for me, I always turn to books when I want to feel less alone.
Hmm.
So I would hope that readers do find themselves in some of those stories and
Hmm.
feel less alone.
Yes. I feel like I relate to some of your stories because, like you said, I also have bipolar and I am so, so scared to have kids because I do not want it passed down to them. And I did have the same conversation with my boyfriend that I'm seeing. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm kind of scared to pass it on to my kids. So I feel like I can relate to your stories. That's why I would love to read them because they're relatable.
And that's the word I think I needed, relatable. That's what I want them to be.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So can you talk about the role of dark humor in your writings?
Absolutely. That's an interesting thing because honestly, until my mid 20s, I didn't realize I was funny. I didn't know, and I grew up in a family, my father's Dutch, where the humor just was very dark. I thought that was the only way to be funny, but
Mhm.
I also kind of got the idea that maybe women weren't supposed to be funny or not too funny anyways. Just your sense of humor is laughing at his jokes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took me a while to come into that voice, but when it came to being funny, it just felt very natural to go for the dark side of it. I don't know what it is. It's the laugh or cry aspect of it, like it's more empowering to laugh than cry, I think.
That's true. That's true. How do you know when a story is done? Like, how did you know when your story was done?
That's a tough one. And it's a little different for each one. Honestly, there's a point for me where I can't see any new possibilities for it, and I'm kind of sick of looking at it, where it's just like, "Okay, I don't know how I can make this better. I can make it different. I can take this paragraph out, add a paragraph here, but am I doing anything to improve the story?" When I get to a point where I'm not sure about that anymore, I'll usually stick it in a drawer, let it percolate for a while, pull it out, maybe show it to some early readers and ask for their feedback. And usually that's when I get the confirmation that I think it's ready to send out.
Yeah, true, true. So, how has living with bipolar disorder shaped your voice as a writer?
Oh boy. Um, as a writer and even as a person, it's in everything I do. Like
Hmm.
there's no escaping it, really.
Hmm.
Um, but I think resilience is an important aspect of it because you can't live with something chronic that you have to manage every single day and not develop some resilience. I mean, even if you try your hardest not to, you're gonna. Sorry
Oh,
about it. And that really helps as a writer because one of the things that happens if you're interested in publishing is you're going to get rejected a lot.
oh
You're
yeah,
going to have to hear a lot of no's before you say yes.
that's
So just being able to cope with bipolar and the frustrations of that, knowing that it's cyclical and that there's never really an end to those moods and shifts, and that they're, even if you're enjoying a period of stability, it will end, just like the depression will end and the hypomanic phase will end.
true.
Being able to cope with that translates to being able to cope with rejection.
Yes, yes, true, true. So, what do you wish more people understood about the bipolar disorder?
Oh boy, so many things. Um, I wish people knew it's more common than they realize.
Oh yeah, oh
Sometimes when people say things that are inconsiderate, like the weather is so bipolar or things like that, I wish they realized that they're affecting someone. They may not think that someone who's listening is bipolar, but maybe that person isn't bipolar themselves. It could be someone they care for. It could be a family member, a friend. It That kind of thing hurts. I wish people understood how language matters, those
yeah.
small little things like saying I live with bipolar, not
Hmm.
necessarily I am, because it is more than that. I am more than that. Ah, see, I could run on about this, but those are at the top. Yeah.
Oh man, yes, yes. And people really don't understand. They just think, "Oh, you're crazy." Like that's their response. You're crazy. I'm like, that's not the right word to use.
No, I think honestly, crazy is a word that we can retire. There's never a moment you need to use that.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, my favorite word now to use instead is wild. Do you
Yeah,
think something is crazy? No, it's wild.
that's true. That's true. So, what are some expectations of womanhood that your stories push back against?
I think the loveliness imperative is my big pushback. And when I say loveliness imperative, I mean there's a pressure on women to make themselves appealing to men
Hmm.
in pretty much everything we do. Like if you're going to disagree, you better do it quietly. If you're going to be sick, cough daintily, don't have that big loud man sneeze. Just anything and everything, you have to just kind of, make it look effortless. And that loveliness thing is such BS. I don't have characters in my book who are pretty and attractive in the usual sense. They're anti-heroines. Like if you read Raymond Carver, he doesn't give you all these Clark Kent Superman people. And I just wanted to have women who were like that, who were a little bit gross maybe, or who were just vulgar in the sense of being upfront, like this is ugly. I'm going to show you how ugly it is. And
Yeah,
I wanted to just allow a space for women to be ugly. Like ugly is part of life. It's the other side of beauty. And that's kind of our title, The Beauty and the Hell of It.
that's true. That's true. So, why do you think it is important to write about ordinary moments?
Because they make up our lives. We don't get that many big special moments. And that's fine. I think there's beauty in the ordinary,
Mhm.
but I think there's stuff to be learned from the ordinary too. Like it's easy to let our eyes glaze over the stuff that happens all the time.
Mhm.
Familiarity breeds contempt, right? And that's another thing I just like to push back on a little and say, well, this is familiar, but also it counts. It's worth exploring.
Mhm. Yeah. So, how do you explore power dynamics in your stories?
Power. I think I
Mhm,
devoted my entire undergrad to studying power. I chose English literature, which seems maybe a little strange for that because you study the canon, it's the male, the white, and the dead. And I took all my other courses though in like sociology and women's studies and because I was interested in how power works. And
mhm,
what I discovered is people don't care about power and how it moves
mhm.
if it's moving below their level.
Yes.
And that bugs me because I remember being in this sociology class and asking my professor, why is it that you only see women in women's studies classes? And he said, well, people don't usually study lower social strata, which was his very fancy way of saying men aren't interested in studying women.
Mhm,
So part of what I'm doing in making my stories like darkly humorous is reaching for that audience beyond just women. I want men to get a sense of how powerless it can be to be a woman at times. Not always, but certain moments.
yes, yes, I agree. So, these are my last final questions, and this is about what you have coming up next. So, how has your personal journey changed the way you approach storytelling?
I think it's made me more open-minded, like just as a person in general, which lends itself then to the storytelling part. Um, I don't think I was raised in a particularly open-minded family. That was something that I had to build on, and mostly it happened to me through reading, meeting people, and studying. And that stuff helped me understand myself better.
Mhm,
It helped me understand bipolar better. And then that translates into writing. Okay, I see the world as a bigger place. I see shades and shades of gray. There's no more black and white for Lynda. And I guess the other part is having self acceptance. You need that in early drafts
mhm,
just to get through the part where the writing is ugly, if you will. You need to have that faith that it's going to come through in your revisions. You're going to be able to build this into something better and that it's going to matter
mhm.
because you do have to believe in yourself ultimately to write any word down. So, yeah, I think that's a long answer, but all those little things contribute to how I approach my storytelling.
Oh, okay, okay. So, what advice would you give inspiring writers, especially those writing about painful truths?
Ah, okay. I think there's power in realizing what you're doing is not for everyone.
Mhm,
I mean, assuming you're writing to share. If you're just writing down the words to get them out, that's good. Know that it takes courage to do it. Celebrate yourself when you do it.
mhm,
Um, if you're putting those words forth into the world, you can expect some pushback, but I would say that's a good thing. People are responding to what you're doing. So that's part of it, part and parcel of the package of sharing. And ultimately, if you reach just a few people and they can relate to what you're doing, they resonate with what you're saying,
mhm.
to me, that makes it worthwhile. And
Yeah.
anyone has the power to do that.
Wow, that's true. That's true. So, what's next for you in your journey? Are you working on any new book or anything like that?
Yes, I'm working on another collection of stories, and I'm exploring betrayal in terms of how we betray each other, how we betray ourselves, how we're betraying the earth right now. Um, all those good things. Heavy stuff, which is kind of my territory. No novel on the horizon. I know everybody says once you have your stories out, you need to get a novel into the world. That's not happening yet. I'm playing with a little bit of creative nonfiction, which is heavy for me to write about things that have actually happened.
Nice, nice. I look forward to listening to your journey and following along. So, so is there any advice, any final advice you would like to give our listeners?
Be brave, put the words down, don't worry about what other people think.
Yes, great advice. And my last and final question: where can my listeners find your books?
Barnes and Noble, Indigo and Chapters in Canada, Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, as well as select local independents.
Okay, I'm gonna look it up, and you should also have it on audiobook too.
Yes, I am excited for that release.
Thank you so much, Lynda, for being a guest today, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you for having me, Brooke. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, I want to thank you all so much for coming and listening to Lynda's story about her book and living with bipolar. I know the struggles. So I want to thank you all so much for listening and see you next time for the next interview this Saturday. Bye.